In terms of its role in internet culture, We Didn't Start the Fire is one of the weirdest songs out there. With other culturally relevant music, it's usually there because of how fondly the piece is remembered, or maybe it's because the song has become a meme. Not We Didn't Start the Fire though. Every once in a while, somebody thinks they have the ability to make a good modern version of the song. None of these new renditions even pale in comparison to the original though. Even ignoring the sound quality of most of these don't grasp what the original song was trying to say in the slightest. In my opinion, it's just kind of a disrespectful misunderstanding of the song. Instead of remembering what the song has to say, it's often just regarded as a song that lists out stuff. It's the list of things from history class song. And none of these sequels do it worse than Fall Out Boy's recent cover of the song. The original spanned from the late 40s to the late 80s, with their sequel covering from the late 80s to the early 2020s. Now, knowing Fall Out Boy, how do you think they did? Was it A, handled respectfully and full of nuance? B, kind of sloppy but ultimately in good spirits? C, exactly like the fan-made YouTube covers? Or D, somehow even worse? If you said D, you'd be correct. Yeah, so as you can tell, I don't like this cover at all. While the singing and music is fine, the song's lyrics are quite the train wreck. There are a couple things that I think makes a good We Didn't Start the Fire sequel, and I'll be using Fall Out Boy's cover as an example of what not to do. So without further ado, let's just hop into it. Aspect 1. It needs actually relevant events. The immediate takeaway people get from We Didn't Start the Fire sequels is just the stuff they cover. The song tends to be so fondly looked back on because Gen X and baby boomers remember the exact events they lived through in the song. Now, granted, not everything is a slam dunk. Remember the hula hoop line? Looking back, that was a kinda strange inclusion, but most of the things in the song are pretty well edged, I'd say. Most of the entries arguably defined those two previously mentioned generations. As such, a modern sequel should try and do the exact same thing, but for Gen Z and millennials. Now, the choices here for Fall Out Boy's sequel were so bad, Twitter started immediately memeing them. This is no better illustrated to me than with the opening line. The start of the song, which is supposed to be a summation of the past 30 or so years, perplexingly opens with Captain Planet. Now, in my opinion, it's just an objectively awful opening choice. While Captain Planet does have some sort of cultural relevance, in no way did the show influence an entire generation, especially in the way that somebody like, Bill Clinton did. Now you might fire back that a lot of the lines in the original are not generation defining, and I agree that some of them aren't, but remember where this is placed in the song itself. This is the opening line, your first impression of the song. What does the original have? Harry Truman. As arguably the catalyst for the Cold War, at least on the American side, it serves as a crucial piece of history, but also a symbolically powerful opening. The Cold War defined We Didn't Start the Fire, and what does using Captain Planet signify? The time period after the Cold War is defined by cartoons? You know what I think they did here? Fall Out Boy took a generally known thing with the same number of syllables as Harry Truman and didn't give it a second thought. They just shoved it into place, regardless of context. But whatever, I guess I can deal with that opening. What I put my foot down at is them just putting downright meaningless events in. Have you ever wondered why the majority of the events in We Didn't Start the Fire come from the 50s and 60s? Aside from the fact that Billy Joel grew up in that time, it's the most recent 2 decades at the time that passed through something I like to call the filter of relevancy. A lot of things from the past 20 or so years can seem a lot more relevant than how they actually are, and a lot of these We Didn't Start the Fire sequels, including this one, fall into the trap of including things from a couple years ago that are barely relevant. Maybe they had like a funny news week, or they slowed international transport for like a couple days, but it's not something that would be covered in any history classes at all. A great example of this from the song is the deepfakes line. Deepfakes gained cultural relevance in like the middle of the pandemic, but the thing is there's like no buzz around them. Some events are very obviously life-changing when you immediately see them, but I don't think deepfakes is one of those things. There really hasn't been any major improvements or like new laws written on deepfake technology since it came out. It's just something kind of scary to people who don't really follow the news. Some slightly different but similar things are the mentions of Balloon Boy and Fyre Fest. These had like one news cycle of relevancy before completely fading. Balloon Boy is such an obscure choice that I wouldn't blame you if you thought it was referencing Five Nights at Freddy's, and Fyre Fest is at best a funny Twitter moment from 2017. They don't feed into a story of things going on. Okay, you know what? At least those events happened, right? At the bare minimum, if you're gonna write a We Didn't Start the Fire sequel, you should at least know what you're talking about. And this is where the Fermi Paradox comes in. Hey, why is the Fermi Paradox here? It is definitely in the wrong time period. It was created in the 50s by Enrico Fermi. It hasn't had a cultural resurgence either. Aside from like one Kurzgesagt video, a lot of people wouldn't even know what the Fermi Paradox is in the first place. What makes me so mad about it is that it's just here. It's not doing anything in the song. You literally wrote a list of things, and one of the things in that list is not accurate to your song. How about another line about the white rhino going extinct? Oh wait, the white rhino didn't go extinct. One subspecies did. It would have been fine if they mentioned the northern white rhino, but the species as a whole isn't even endangered. Like, a cursory Google search would reveal that. And I have a sneaking suspicion why these haphazard scientific events are thrown in here. Fall Out Boy probably doesn't know a lot about science, and so they put things they heard on the news or on YouTube at one point. Wanna know why I think this? One of the major areas covered in the original song is science. And so, if you knew anything about modern science, there are so many things you could have referenced here instead. Even if you just followed like tech, one area, there's more than enough. Here, I'll share some right now. The Hubble telescope, broadband internet, the smartphone, the sequencing of chimpanzee DNA, high definition, the black hole picture, Stephen Goddamn Hawking, or just the pandemic. Yup, not one mention of the pandemic in this whole song. You know, the thing that's irreparably shaped culture for the past 3.5 years? That global pandemic? Okay, I'm gonna calm down. I shouldn't be getting so angry at a song. But Christ, how do you fumble the ball so many times here? Let's move into the second aspect. Aspect 2, it needs to have a solid purpose. One of the bigger problems I always see with these songs is that they just list stuff. They're just long lists of things that happened for no discernible reason. You know, at least the original had the common courtesy to put things in chronological order. Fall Out Boy's rendition of We Didn't Start the Fire just completely ditches this. From what I can tell, there's no rhyme or reason for a lyric being placed anywhere. Now, in my opinion, this hardcore dampens the whole experience. The timeline was a crucial part of the original song. It's a retelling of Billy Joel's life during the Cold War. He was born in 1949, and the music video reinforces this idea. You can tell what events shaped his childhood and his adult life. You can explicitly see his love of music being expressed. There just isn't any congruence with the sequel. Things are there for no specific reason. Heck, only 2 of the band members even grew up in that time period. Now, it's not a necessary aspect, but it just emphasizes the pre-existing flaws in the song. For example, some stuff is just repeated. Climate change is brought up twice in almost exactly the same way. And if you include Captain Planet, that'll be 3 times. Why do you need to mention climate change and then mention polar bears got no ice? The listeners aren't stupid, they can get that polar bears got no ice means climate change. Here's another one. Michael Jordan is mentioned twice in this song. Not in different contexts either, not even in a different verse. They say Michael Jordan 23, and then 4 lines later they say Michael Jordan 45. Now, I'm not going to argue Michael Jordan has no place here. That would be kinda ridiculous, as Michael Jordan is one of the biggest athletes of all time. You know what I think would have sufficed? Michael Jordan Legacy. It's concise, straight to the point, and emphasizes Michael Jordan's long-lasting legacy. They do this thing multiple times in the song, by the way, where they say 2 things that don't individually need to be said, but they could be condensed into one thing very easily. The worst of these is Robert Downey Jr. Iron Man. Now first off, the flow of that line was just downright awful. Their previous line before that is Kim Jong-un, so why not say something like Marvel's Prophets to the Moon, which I think flows a lot better and encapsulates both aspects of that line. The other one that does this is Stranger Things Tiger King. Now aside from the fact that Tiger King has already become irrelevant, and Stranger Things will probably meet the same fate one day, could they have not put both of these under Netflix and the streaming wars I can't take it anymore? Or something similar to that? A lot of the lines in this rendition feel like they're squeezing for space, while at the same time there's just a ton of filler. Another way the song can feel aimless is through lines that are so vague they don't really have a purpose. The prime example here is earthquakes. Which earthquake or earthquakes are they talking about? Are they just generally talking about earthquakes that happened? Is it the one that caused the Fukushima tsunami? Well, it can't be because they mentioned Fukushima at another point. The lack of time is really screwing with this one here. How about Iceland volcano? Or SSRIs? What do those mean? is not linked to a time period. Without a chronological base, everything just becomes a big pop culture sludge. Here's a novel idea. What if we make the song about growing up during the oil wars? Fixate everything around 2001 and go from there. It would fix the strange aimlessness without ruining what makes We Didn't Start the Fire, We Didn't Start the Fire. And speaking of aimlessness, let's go into our third aspect. Aspect 3. It needs a consistent tone. The tone of a song is often overlooked, but it's really important. It's what helps us read the different emotions in the song. For the original Billy Joel piece, it tries to aim for a more hopeful and nostalgic tone. That's what the chorus reads to me anyways. Fall Out Boy drops this aspect really hard though. The most notable tone indicator that's missing is any rising or falling action. Because events are haphazardly organized, there's no lyrical payoffs. It leads to odd situations where two items on the exact opposite of the tonal scale are paired without a reason. For example, the Cubs winning the World Series and the oil wars are snuggled up back to back for no reason. I wouldn't mind it as much if they were thematically linked, but they aren't. They keep doing it over and over again. Some of my favorite examples from the song are when SpongeBob and the Golden State Killer are put together. And of course, the Queen dying is put right up next to 9/11. Who could forget Balloon Boy and the War on Terror? Just classic stuff. The best way I could describe this weird back and forth would be jarring. In this version of the piece, positive and negative events just kind of zigzag back and forth. Usually if you want a tone shift, you want to try and transition between the two states. The original does this in a pretty smart way in my opinion. A lot of the events are separated through obfuscation. It serves two purposes. One, it acts as a smoother listening experience for those who don't know the event, and two, it's a little bit of a nod to those who know the context clues. This brings us to perhaps the worst lyric I've ever heard. Let me just read it out. Meghan Markle, George Floyd. Burj Khalifa, Metroid. This is not hyperbole in any sense of the word. This is one of the worst written bars I have ever heard. It breaks all three of the rules I've mentioned previously. There is no place in a We Didn't Start the Fire song for Metroid. It is one of Nintendo's worst selling franchises of all time. And they put it in here just to rhyme it with George Floyd, which is perhaps the worst tonal zigzag of this entire song. Its inclusion is haphazard and sloppy. Metroid existed before the theoretical start time of the song, but it's not a specific Metroid because the song is out of order. This is the only reference to video games other than Pokemon in the whole song, and it's paired with a guy who was brutally murdered by the cops, because they couldn't think of a better rhyme. You pair abject human suffering with a Nintendo franchise. How tone deaf are you, Fall Out Boy? You make no attempt in hiding brutal deaths and horrible tragedies, and then you pair them with baby things. They do this over and over and over throughout the whole song. Shootings, murder, death, not hidden. I've seen people try and say they're making some kind of social commentary about the 24-hour news cycle, but it's more akin to pissing in a graveyard to protest the military. Your horrible sequel is disrespectful garbage. Okay, calm down. I think I can pin this song's lameness to two ideas. One where they're just ignorant, and one where they're malevolent. The ignorant idea is that they just don't get what's going on in the world, and they made a We Didn't Start the Fire cover because they thought it was a great song, and it would be impactful to today. The other theory is that they don't care, and they're specifically trying to appeal to white middle-aged people who also don't care. When comparing events mentioned, the original has a lot more music and political events, while the sequel has a lot more television and tragedy referenced. And it's mainly stuff you'd read off a newspaper headline without delving into the article at all. It just kinda makes sense that as we grew past the Cold War, the original meaning got lost. It's now just the List of Things song. Is the original perfect? No. In terms of best Billy Joel songs, it's probably in the bottom half, but I still think it's an important cultural piece that should be understood. Am I saying you're uninformed if you like this cover? Of course not, you can like whatever you want. It just specifically skews in a direction that lends itself to shallow interpretation. Music is art, but not all art is created equal. This is Luxy Hugs, signing off. Hey, if you like this video, I'm working on more music-related projects in the future. I've got a whole Hawaii Part 2 analysis series going on right now, and if you want to see that, why not hit subscribe? My next goal is the big 1K. I stream occasionally, and I have a Patreon, Twitter, and Tumblr.